So it's Friday, it's the time of the week, it's you hangout time. So today I'm joined with Jeroen. Jeroen, I always get your surname wrong. Jeroen Breuer?
In Dutch it's Jeroen Breuer.
Ah, excellent. So as always, Jeroen, we get to do kind of an introduction and kind of how you got involved with Umbraco. So how did you get involved with Umbraco?
Back in 2009, I worked at a company called Tribal, and they wanted to switch to an open source CMS, and that was Umbraco, and that's how I got rolled into it. And I loved everything about it.
So was it your decision, or was it kind of like someone higher up in the company at the time?
It was a higher up decision. I didn't actually heard about Umbraco until they told me, this is the CMS you're going to have to work with.
Okay.
But I did some research and I was actually really excited about it. So didn't have any problem with that.
So obviously now you've been an MVP for a couple of years running. So you do a lot in the community, help people out on the forum. So kind of why... and packages as well. So kind of what's the motivation behind that in terms of kind of contributing back to the community, kind of being so helpful?
Well, it's the same thing like what you're doing. I try to give a lot of things, but I also I get a lot of things back. So you know, Umbraco itself is free, and there are so many free packages as well. And I just want to do something back for the community. They've also done so much for me.
No, exactly. I'm totally on the same wavelength with you. So obviously you mentioned around 2009. So obviously you've gone from the days of XSLT to the kind of the switch from Razor to MVC. So the last time I had you on, you was joined by Jeroen, and you was talking about the hybrid framework.
True.
But so today you're going to show us an updated version, yes, for version 7. Exactly.
The newest version is it's still the hybrid frameworks. The principles are still the same, but this version I built it from the ground up.
Okay, so you started with a blank slate and just went right. I'm gonna.
Yeah, actually, I started it at the retreat. I was there with Stefan, and he showed me some. He showed me the model.
I'm gonna rewrite it.
And I got really excited about that, and I was like, okay, how can I implement this in the hybrid framework? And that's when I started a new solution, and I just sat there a couple of hours with Stefan, and we just started implementing it.
Okay, nice.
Yeah, and that was a few months ago, and since then it evolved, and I added more features to it. And we've also, at Have a Nice Day, we also built a few websites with it already, you know, to see how that went, and that went actually really well. And now I feel like it's time to release also the new version, put it on GitHub so other people can also see it.
So just to kind of remind people, the hybrid framework is kind of like, not like a starter kit, but like, I suppose like a code version of a starter kit in terms of giving you to kind of principles and kind of best practices in terms of how to do controllers and things like that. And
yeah, exactly. I could mention a few of the things that are the basics of the hybrid framework.
Yeah.
And that's if you want to do some logic, if you want to get news items on the home page, I prefer to do that logic in controllers, and with the hybrid framework that's very easy to do. Everything is a service controller, so if you route hijack, you can do that in a service controller, but if you have a form and you post it, you can post back to that same controller.
Okay, nice.
And it also comes with a default controller that's, for example, used for donut caching. So it doesn't matter which page you visit, it always goes through a controller, so you can always do something custom if you want to.
Okay, very nice.
So I also mentioned it also has donut caching for great performance. One of the things it also comes with is bundling. In this new version, I switched to Cruncher.
Okay. Yep.
And
so was you using .NET bundling before then, previously?
Yeah, the web optimization.
Yep. Okay.
but this was just easier to use, so that's just a preference.
Okay, cool.
And another few things is that it comes with a lot of settings that are improved, like for example the max upload size, things like that in the web.config.
Yep.
All already set. And it also comes with a lot of packages, for example archetype, SEO checker, things like that.
Yep.
It's all pre-installed in one project. And
okay. So is it a Visual Studio project I download? Is it?
If I'll share my screen.
Yeah, cool.
So it's on GitHub already.
Cool.
People can already download it. You can add the link afterwards after your Hangout session.
Yep.
So perhaps it's a good idea if I start showing some more of the new features.
Yeah, it's in terms of kind of. So do I just clone this repository as the starting point, or do I have to download it from NuGet? How do I get started?
You can just download the zip.
Yep.
And after downloading the zip, it's just you unzip the file. You get a Visual Studio solution. You open the solution. Do a view in browser, and it starts running.
Cool. So I presume you've got it's using a SQL CE database if you've kind of bundled.
Yes, it comes with SQL CE by default. But there is also the back file which you can use.
Ah, neat.
So you can also use SQL Server if you prefer, but this one is just an example site, so don't really see a need for that if you want to.
No. Yeah.
Okay, so let me talk about one of the new features. The biggest new feature is the models builder. If you want to know more.
So that is Stefan's model.
Yeah. That's Stefan's models builder. And so if you want to have more information about how all the things you can do with the models builder, you already did a Hangout session with him about it.
Yep, exactly.
So I'm not going to explain all of that, but if you want to use the hybrid framework, you do need to install this tool that I'm viewing now. You just download it, install it in Visual Studio.
So it's just a Visual Studio extension, isn't it?
Yeah. If you go to your tools, you have CBU here, and all you need to do here is give the URL of your website and username and password.
Yep.
And once you've done that, the models builder can connect to your website, and it can generate models based on your document type.
Fantastic.
So I can give a quick example of that. If we go to the models, under builder we have the generated models.
Yep.
And if we go, for example, to gallery, and I just remove a property, save it, and I run it. If you click on the builder, this is where the models builder is defined.
Okay.
Run custom tool. Then the models are regenerated again, and the property that I just removed
will be re-added
again because it's a property on that document type.
Fantastic.
Should be almost ready.
Yeah, so it's obviously talking to the website, I presume, figuring out the document type, and is it rebuilding all of those models there, or was it just rebuilding just that one?
All the models. Now you see the file I had opened, it's closed again.
Yep.
Because it's probably just deleted and added again.
Yep.
And if you now go back, here I can see that it just generated the images for the gallery.
Yeah, fantastic.
I can also show, if you go to a gallery, here we have the images, which is just a media picker. So that property is generated automatically. And So everything is, that's the cool thing about the models builder, that everything is mapped automatically. I don't need to do anything extra. That's with the models factory. Stefan also told about that. So if I just go to a view to a news item, I can just say, okay, pass in the news item, and I can do model.content.title, current date, body text. Those are all generated, and I don't have to do anything for that. That's all the models builder. Behind the screen.
So is the models builder even doing the extension method on the image there? So you got model.content.image. I presume cropper and cropper.source is an extension method on the image model or property on the model.
I was going to that later, but I can.
Okay, no. Tell me later.
Okay, but it isn't. I'll just show it later. So all the things they're automatically mapped, but they're also with the models builder. Everything goes through a property editor value converter if it's available.
Yep.
So Umbraco has some default property editors. For example, if I have a content picker, I can also demo that. If we go to content, we can see a content picker here. It automatically returns an iPublish content instead of the ID, which you usually select, and that's because I think this is actually part of Jeroen, his Umbraco core property editor value converter.
Yep.
But so all the models, all the properties that are generated are also going through a converter, and based on the converter, it actually knows what kind of type it needs to create.
Yeah.
And I've also, in the hybrid framework, I added some custom property converters. For example, I'm using Google Maps in this website, so I have a converter for that. What I also did is I added a converter for the image cropper. This isn't done by default because it would break the default image cropper extension methods.
Okay, yep.
But I don't want to use those in this project because I already have images that are generated from the models builder. Okay. So we don't need those extension methods for published content anyway. So I also have the image cropper converted, and I also have my own media picker converter. And now I'm coming back to the images again about the cropper which we just saw.
Yep.
So the media picker by default returns an iPublish content, or it doesn't by default. It returns an integer.
Yep. So you need to figure out what that media ID is and return it. Yep.
And in Jeroen, his converter package for the core, it returns an iPublish content. That's already one step better. And I decided to go actually one step ahead, and that's with images. When you use the media picker, you use it for 95% to select images.
Yeah, exactly.
That's basically all you do. So if I have images selected with a media picker, I would prefer that it also returns images instead of an iPublish content.
Yep, makes perfect sense.
Yeah. So and I already have an image object because the models builder, it doesn't only work on document types, also on media types. So I have an image.
Yep.
That's generated, and the image, it has the Umbraco file, all those things, the Umbraco extension. So nor by default. I'll demo it if I go to an image.
Yep.
So the image actually is the image cropper. So we have a property called Umbraco file in the back in the generated file.
Yep.
But I actually didn't prefer that. So with the models builder, you can also say, okay, the Umbraco file. Let's rename that to cropper, because in this case, it's always a cropper.
Yeah, and it makes sense to be.
So the generated image actually has a cropper property, and because it's a cropper, it goes through my image cropper converter, and it actually already returns an image crop dataset, which is in the Umbraco core. So I'm trying to do as much work. The hybrid framework tries to do as much work for you as it can. If you have a media picker.
So it's just trying to solve kind of like common patterns and problems, yes?
Yeah. So it's becoming very easy. I now have this this gallery here, and it has a media picker on it. I've selected images with it. So through the converter, it already returns you an IEnumerable of that image type that already actually has a cropper property on it. And based on that cropper, I can do some extension methods.
Yep.
So if I go to my gallery, this really is everything you need to create a gallery in the hybrid framework. You have model.content.
Literally just loop over an array of images, and then on that image, like you said, you got the cropper, which was the property model value converter, and then you've got the extension methods on that cropper object.
Exactly, that's what I'm doing here. So the get responsive crop URL, I've copied it from the uSlimzy package. Because uSlimzy works with the iPublish content, and this needed to work with the cropper that's generated with the cropper dataset.
Cool.
And the get responsive crop URL, as part of the hybrid framework, also works with Slimzy. So these images, they aren't just, if I go to a gallery, they aren't just responsive, they also return a smaller image.
Yeah.
So that was part of the models builder. The objects are generated. I'm trying to make images as easy as it is. It really only takes a few lines of code anymore, and
yeah, it's fantastic.
And if you have a file, for example, it would also try to return an image object, which would be null. So in that case, in the converter, that's the only thing you have to do. You have to exclude the files, actually. So if you want to use a media picker.
Okay, so yeah, so if it was like you picked a PDF or a file media type, then
exactly. In that case, you say, okay, I don't want to return. I don't want to have an image. I want to have an iPublish content return.
Yeah. Okay.
And you can even let's see for the news, for example, you get an iPublish content, and you can extend the generated class and still make it return a file. But in this case, you need to write some extra code for that. So for images, you don't need to write extra code, and if you want to use a file, you need to add some extra code to that. But you still get a file strongly typed returned.
Fantastic.
So that's how the models builder is implemented in the hybrid framework. Now with the models builder, you have auto-generated models, and there was a problem with the hybrid framework that in a previous version, in the previous version of the hybrid framework, you wrote your own models. They weren't generated for you.
Okay.
You could give them a base class. And I had a discussion with Stefan about this, and he said it's not a good idea to give your generated models a base class. Instead, it's better to use to extend the render model and make that your master. That's one of the principles of the hybrid framework that's still the same. If I have a master page, in this case, it has an iMaster model. And goes through a default controller, and it still creates a master model, and on the master model it adds, for example, Twitter and Facebook and things like that. those are needed on my master.
Yep.
So I want to have those things on my master, but I still want to pass my models just to my normal views without having any conflicts with the master.
Okay. Yep.
So that's done with, in this case, you have your news item, because that's the object you want to have in this page. That's your model.content, that's the news item. But you need to wrap it in a master model, and because you wrap it in a master model, the master can still have the objects it also needs. Does that make sense?
Okay, cool.
So
Yes, no, that makes sense.
It still works the same as in the hybrid framework for v6. The only difference is that you now, instead of your news item that you inherit, you pass the news item to a master model. And that's, there is some logic here. So there's a create master model, and there's actually a create magic model. That part Stefan wrote.
Magic model. Okay.
He wrote it at the Code Garden retreat, and it really does some kind of dark magic, but it works. He wrote it, and I haven't touched it since.
Too scared.
I just keep it there. I need it, and the whole hybrid framework relies on it. But it's there.
Fantastic.
So another thing with the hybrid framework, it always had a bunch of extension methods. So here we have, for example, the website extension method. If you want to go, it doesn't matter where you are. If you need the root of your website, people usually do ancestor or self. But I just wrote an extension method for that on the iPublishContent, which you can call.
Yep.
Which is, for example, done on the module logic, so I can do content. That's my current page.website, which returns me the highest website, the highest node. But in this
so you've got kind of like Twitter and Facebook on the kind of the root node.
Those are properties on the website. You know, you don't want to keep those things on your homepage. You just need them everywhere on your site, so you keep them on the highest node. And you call the highest node when you create your master model, and you get the properties there. But the thing is, here you can also see that the website itself, in the previous version of the hybrid framework, it returns an iPublishContent. In this case, I also have a model for my website, which is generated through the models builder, which I can return. So even if I do .website, I can do just .twitter and .facebook, and I get properties that are available on the highest node.
Fantastic. Yep. So if you was to add a new setting, as long as it goes through the model generator, you could get that from the website extension method.
Yes, exactly. So it's very easy to get those properties anywhere.
Yep.
Okay, so that was another thing that's new. One thing I always liked about Umbraco are the media pickers. So
yep.
in Umbraco 6 we always use them with a start node. In Umbraco 7 I just wanted to use the default media picker. And since Umbraco 7.1, if we go to the media picker, for example the multiple, you can see here that there's a start node available. And that's something I really needed that, because I really prefer that the user can only select media from a certain folder, and also only upload to a certain folder, so the media section stays clean and tidy.
Yeah, no, makes perfect sense.
So one thing that I try to do is, you know, you have your start node here, but the start node is just a picker, so it's not very flexible. If I want to have multiple start nodes, that would mean that I needed to create multiple data types of the media picker and assign those to my properties. And that's something which I really didn't want to do. I always did that with Damp in v6, and even if you created multiple data types, it still wasn't flexible, because what if I wanted to have a different folder based on a different on the same document type, but perhaps a different node. So,
Okay. Yep.
for example, I have here two galleries, and they're both of the gallery document type, but I still wanted to have them different start nodes. Now, with the current data type, that wouldn't be possible because you can't give different media pickers to the same document type.
Okay. Yeah.
So that I thought that wasn't possible, but then on Twitter I asked if there was some kind of event I could use, and Casey Niehaus gave me an example for that, and it's actually possible to hack the web API that's used in Umbraco and change the media picker start node in there. So, for example, there's a web API handler. And what I'm doing here is, if Umbraco opens the page, I go into my method, and in here I can decide what kind of start node is necessary. Based on some data, actually. So I don't have.
So you could do some logic. You could figure out if the user was Fred, then they could have a different start node, or
exactly. And I added a custom table to the database that's called content override. And I also created a DTO for that. So here we can see all the properties that are in the database. Don't have SQL Server open right now, and it's all.
No, that's fine.
Yay! So I'll just show the properties here. So we have a content type, a property type. It also supports archetype, and you can also add a node ID. So based on these three things, so if it's a gallery and it's on the gallery property for a certain node, give me back a different start node for the media picker. And that's done through the web API handler. And if I now open my gallery 2, you can see here that the start node is actually gallery 2. And if I go to gallery 1, you can see that the start node is gallery 1. And I actually took it one step further.
So is there even, I was going to say, is there any logic in there if I create a new gallery in the content tree?
There is.
So if I create
going to demo.
Okay, go on. Go on then.
So if we create a gallery 4, you can publish that. Then here we have the gallery 4. Go to the gallery here, and here there's actually the gallery 4.
So it's created the media folder in the media section straight away for me. Fantastic.
There's gallery 4 here, and if I upload the images in here, those will be available in the gallery 4 here. And that's actually done with an event. That's in the Umbraco events. So here I check if the folder or if the media folder already exists. Otherwise, I just use the API to create the media folder, and then I go to my custom table and say, okay, link that media folder to my new created gallery, and set the start node like that. So this way, even if the user wants to create a mess in the media section, it's no use because he can't select the images here. So we really force the user like this to create a clean media gallery.
Yeah, no, that's a nice idea.
And that's one of the features that I've also added to the hybrid framework for Umbraco 7. I'll just continue. So one of the other things we've added was Cruncher. So that's for bundling. So it works really easy. You can just say, okay, I just want to have my main CSS, my slider, my files. You don't need to build anything anymore. You just say here which files you want to add. And there's a little configuration. Mm. Oh, here at the bottom. So here I can say, okay, for CSS files, scan the content and the CSS path, and for JavaScript, the scripts and the ES folder. So if I have my master and I have my main.css, it goes to the CSS folder and checks if the file's there, and then it bundles it.
Yeah, fantastic.
And one of the things I liked about Cruncher is that, for example, I can also say, okay, I want to use an external file, give that a token Google Maps.
Then you can reference that.
Maps here, so it works with internal and external sources as well.
Yeah, fantastic.
So another thing added to the Hyper framework. I also added, this is the best practices, and I also added a lot of examples to it. For example, a URL provider and a URL segment provider. If I go to my homepage, we see here that the link to document is /, but actually, if I go to content, which is at the same level, if it opens, is that it's /content, so you expect that home would also be /home, because it's at the same level. But through the URL provider, I can just go to home, and I can just say, okay, if my content is of document type alias home, and it has a parent, give it the parent URL. So home actually uses the website URL, and website uses an internal redirect to home again. So
okay, yep.
The home page. So if I go to the slash, this really is the home page node.
Yep.
But in the menu also, this is Sebastian's ultimate website setup. But in his example, the node would still be /home, and you needed to create a URL rewrite that would let /home go to the / again. And
okay, so you're doing that with the URL segment provider to do that in code.
Not the segment provider, with the URL provider. Here I just say, okay, give the home node a different URL. And that's also being reflected in the back office. So even the link to document is being updated with that. So I have an example for home, and I also have an example for news. So if I've got a date here, and if I go to my news URL, that date is actually also part of the URL. So you don't need anything like a date folder package anymore. You can just use a URL provider, and if you just get the date, you read the date from the current node, and you add the date to the URL. So if I just change the date here. Save and publish it. Then you see that the date is also here, and that's the new date which is being used.
Yeah, fantastic.
So it's just an example. You don't have to use it, but if people want to know how to use it, they can just download the source of the Hybrid framework and see how it's done actually. So
yeah, nice.
For URL provider, you also need a content finder, because you changed the URL to something which doesn't match the tree in the back office. I haven't here. The node expects /news/item1, but it's /news/date/item1. So Umbraco by default cannot find the correct node.
So in theory, it would 404.
Yeah, it would 404, and for that, what's it again? Oh, you need a content finder for that. It's a lot of logic, and that perhaps we still need to find a way to simplify that. Stefan's already thinking about it, but basically here there's a lot of code which determines if the news items exist, if it's part of where it should belong. So you need to program your own routing, but your very flexible with that. And
Okay.
with a URL provider, you also need a content finder to match the node again. But once you've set that up, it's just working, and that's all part of the best practices people can use as an example.
No, fantastic.
Beside the URL provider, there's also a URL segment provider. So here we have some vacancies with some paging. The paging is actually also done by Ajax using an alt template. So another example I added. And if I go to the developer, it says a junior developer.
Mm-hmm.
But in here, the name is actually just developer. So it's the same ID. I paste something. I paste in this case an enum, and I add that as part of the URL.
Okay. Yep.
And that's with a let me see. Oh, that's the segment provider. And because you only change a segment, you don't need a content finder for this, because Umbraco still knows it's still at vacancies developer. You don't add an extra segment like the date in the URL with a /bh.
Okay, so you wasn't actually like adding an extra folder, an extra level to the URL, as it's on the same kind of depth as such. Yes. You don't need the content finder. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So besides all these things like URL providers and content finders, there's also just a lot of data types which I just wanted to demo. Like, okay, what kind of data types are there in V7? Which can you use, and how can you use them in combination with the hybrid framework? So here we have some media that's selected. We have files. We have your YouTube package. It's in here.
Cool. Fantastic.
And there's also an example on how to use Google Maps, and even a lot more, the multi-node tree picker with an example which can select all nodes with the multi-node tree picker. But there's also an example which is only allowed to select news items. This drop-down is actually an enum.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not using the default checkbox list from Umbraco, but it's using new pickers.
Okay, so this is the stuff that Handy Redshirt has written. Yep.
Yes. So new pickers is also a part of the hybrid framework as a package. So it has the enum checkbox list. It actually has the member picker. The member picker is also new pickers, and it also shows an example on how to use a custom label. So by default, the member picker is only the checkbox and the name, but by adding an extra label, you can extend the data type with an image, for example. And it also has the URL picker. It's combining archetype with the multi-URL picker. Things like multiple text box. Another thing, some things I just added to show that they are there and that people know about them, so you can just
that's cool. That's
add
nice thing.
tables in here. You have the SEO tab, and so all of that. If you go to the content page, everything is actually rendered here. All the data types that you're using in the back office are here. The videos that you've selected, the Google Maps, the nodes that you selected, the enum, the member picker, even the table part, things like that. And so if you go to the content page, you can see how everything is done in the hybrid framework, the responsive images.
Nice.
Yeah, everything's in there. So I tried to add as much examples as I could, also on the home page. So I also added an example. How can you do a slider? Usually sliders were done with nodes. In this case, I used archetype for slides. So it's easy to add another slide.
So is this using a nested? So in the archetype, the image picker or the media picker, is that still kind of restricting the start folder?
Yes, yes, that was very tricky to do.
I can imagine.
I actually made a pull request for archetype because it wasn't possible in the beginning, but you can also only select slides here.
Okay, cool.
Since archetype 1.41, I think, at least the latest version is 1.5, it supports the start nodes in there as well.
So I presume you're using the same technique as your...
Yeah, exactly. If I go to the web API handler, it's using a different call because archetype uses a different API.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And because it's a different API, you also get different values back.
Yep.
But all the logic is here to create the start picker, and even if you can have so the image is nested, but you can also have archetypes nested inside another archetype.
So Inception. Yep.
Inception, yeah, and even then you can define the start node for an image.
Ah, neat.
So I discovered that during development, like, okay, that didn't work yet. Added some extra code, and now it is working.
Cool.
So one final example, I'm almost ready.
Yeah, no problem.
Is that I've also added some widgets. If you go to the news, here we see the title, the image, the text, things like that. And the cool thing is I'm also using new pickers for this. And the widgets in the back office, because I'm using new pickers, instead of the multi-node tree picker, you can actually see the rendered widget with all the data, with the same data that's in the front end. You can also see the data in the back office. So, in my opinion, this makes widgets a lot more user-friendly because you don't just see the name that you had with the multi-node tree picker. You can
get a preview, or you can actually render how the widget would actually look. So
it actually previews the widget, and you can just drag and drop it, things like that. It all works the same. And the way the widgets are rendered are with a cool thing from the models builder.
Mm-hmm.
I tweeted about it recently, the declarative style in Razor. So it's easier to just show my example.
Yeah.
Let's see. So here we have the helpers, and based on the dynamic, I select different kind of nodes here. This is an image widget. This is a text widget.
Okay, so different node types. Yep.
Yeah, I just pass those in here and render content through the dynamic. It just knows, okay, if my type is of widget text or widget image, I automatically go to that. It's a bit like XSLT.
Yeah. So if I'm of this type of object, then call this helper method. If I'm of this type of object, then call this helper method.
Exactly, and based on that, you don't need to do anything special anymore. It just knows, okay, I need to render this or I need to render this.
So the only magic there was the actual kind of, it needs to be cast as a dynamic.
Yeah.
The helper method.
Exactly, and the widget text and the widget image are also models generated with the models builder. So that also, you don't need to do anything extra for that. This is a partial view, and if you just go to the news, to the overview, for example, all it does is call the partial view, pass in the widgets which are selected. Again, these widgets are also on the generated model. In this case, I wrote a custom converter for it because by default you get a picker back from new pickers, and I needed an enumerable I publish content. But that's also possible with the models builder. You can override properties and say, okay, I want to return something different than what's done with the converter.
Okay, cool.
So
that's really nice. I suppose the last thing, so how do we, just to remind me, how do we in new pickers render the preview?
Oh, yeah, of course.
Or customize the preview.
Yeah, so that's a cool thing that Handy wrote. If we go to the widgets, in this case it's a new pickers XML prefetch list. So I still use a classic XPath to say which nodes are allowed to be selected.
Yep.
Some values, and here I can say a custom label, and the custom label are macros. So
Okay.
I have a macro. If I go here to my widgets, and the same is done for the member picture, which I just showed at the content.
Yeah.
Should be showing the widgets now. So it's just a macro partial, and I need the key and the keys parameters.
Mm-hmm.
And then if I just show the widgets macro, basically here it just gets the key of the selected node. In this case, I convert it to an Umbraco typed content, and I call the same partial view, which I call content.
Ah, sweet. That's nice.
So that's how I can render the content, the same content I can render in the back and in the front. And I didn't have to do anything special for that. That's all new pickers. I just needed to write a macro and call a partial view that's also called in the front.
Yeah, no, that's really nice.
That's it.
Yeah, very, very smart. No, fantastic. So it seems like it's progressed a lot since we last looked, and obviously a lot more new techniques you've learned along the way in terms of V7.
Yeah, I had a lot of help from Stefan during the development.
So is there anything in specific that you want people to try and take away from this? Do you want people to start building websites using it, or do you just want them to use it as a kind of a learning tool in terms of, okay, this is how I might do a similar approach, and then put it in their own projects, just like little bits here and there?
Yeah, I think what I've learned from the first version of the hybrid framework is that people are using the second option. They just download the hybrid framework, the best practices.
Mm-hmm.
They learn what you can do with it in Umbraco, and then just the bits that they need, put that in their own projects. And if there are some things which they think can be improved, they also give me feedback.
Fantastic.
In this version, there's also feedback from the previous version. Example, the donut caching. It first was a property on each controller, and if you wanted to disable donut caching, you needed to disable the attribute on each controller. And in the new version, it's actually someone figured out that it could also be done in the web.config.
So it could be a bit more granular then.
Yeah, so here I can just say, okay, I make a donut cache profile, and all the controllers, they use this profile from the web.config. And here I can just say, okay, the duration is an entire day, and if I want to disable donut cache, I just comment this line and enable this line, and then donut caching for the entire website is disabled.
Cool.
And that's something I got from feedback from the previous version. So I also hope that I can improve the product that I've released through feedback.
No, fantastic. No, that's it's really good to see that you've taken comments on board and kind of improved the project and see it evolve and get better.
Yeah, and there's also so this version is full of best practices, but there's also going to be a clean version on GitHub. I know I also promised that last year and it didn't happen. But in this case, it's really almost ready. I had a lot of help from Jevon with that.
Mm-hmm.
Not really good with GitHub yet, and he actually made a version that you can just deploy to GitHub. It doesn't. The bin folder is clean, things like that. The git ignore is perfectly optimized for the hybrid framework.
Okay.
The current version that's on GitHub is really also optimized for GitHub, and the clean version will be as well. So the clean version really only has the home page. All the other nodes, all the other content is gone.
Yeah.
But it still has the default controller, the models builder, the extension methods.
Okay, so just the real basics of what I need.
Yeah, if you want to start a new website, that's the version you use. And if you want to know how things are done, you use best practices to just copy over some things.
Yeah, no, fantastic. We did have a couple of questions, however, they've come in Spanish, and I don't know any Spanish. So, unfortunately, I can't ask you those. But no, fantastic, Jeroen. I'm actually quite looking forward to downloading it at some point and kind of pulling it apart and figuring out how to do some of the things you showed me today.
Okay, great. The project is now good, but I'm also going to release it as a new project on add a forum there. So if people have any more questions, they
can ask them now
on the forum.
Yeah, no, fantastic. Thanks for talking to me, Jeroen, and I'll speak to you soon.
Okay, great talking to you.
Thanks. Bye. 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 Bye.